Good morning and good afternoon. I'd like to start by quickly thanking the organizers of the Polar Data Forum for including Sustaining Arctic Observing Networks in this session on knowledge mobilization and decision making. And I'm going to focus in particular on something that SAON's been active with for the last couple of years in development, which is our roadmap for Arctic observing and data systems, a planning and partnership development tool that we hope to use to link the many diverse centers of action that are engaged in polar observing and data management. And so I'm going to just jump right in the interest of time. And I will start with just a brief recap of SAON's scope, vision, and mandate. So SAON, unlike something like the Arctic Council, is open to both Arctic and non-Arctic countries, but it additionally engages with Indigenous peoples organizations, academia, industry, and other key partners in global organizations to support a systematic network, a systematic and improved network of Arctic observations and data systems. And its classic role has been doing this through structured facilitation, such as through our Arctic Data Committee, which is one of the hosts of this meeting. So a little bit about us. Our mandate comes both from the Arctic Council and from the International Arctic Science Committee. So within the region, we very much have our roots in the kind of policy relevant decision-making needs and assessments of the Arctic Council, but also the research space that's exemplified by IASC. But more recently, SAON's been getting more attention through policy processes like the Arctic Science Ministerial Process, which was recognizing that there's a real planning gap in the Arctic for drawing all of these diverse players together in something that goes beyond facilitation and starts to look more like framework development so that we can move our planning along in coherent and systematic ways and have very transparent opportunities for our partners to get engaged in that planning. Further to that, SAON's mandate has also been kind of redoubled and emphasized through the Arctic Observing Summit process. And increasingly, the summit is recognizing that SAON's very well positioned also to lead on these kind of framework and planning tools. And so SAON has begun to step into this space, and its roadmap for Arctic observing and data systems, or the ROADS process, is one of the ways that it's been doing that. And if you'll recall from my introduction, SAON recognizes that we operate in a very non-hierarchical arrangement with all of our partners. These are autonomous centers of authority that need to plan and do their own things for their own outcomes. And so our role is to really do our best to help identify and align what those actions are and how we can bring them together in support of common goals. And so because of that, we need our tools to reflect what our objectives are as well. So I'm going to just very briefly present an example of one of the planning tools within the ROADS process, and then end with a note about how you can get involved. So shared Arctic variables, we recognized in the ROADS process the strength and value of essential variables for planning and coordination. These are places where we can come together around broad phenomena like sea ice and get the right experts in the room to understand what we're trying to accomplish through observing sea ice, what the resulting requirements then become, and then how we translate those requirements into implementation strategies and partnership developments to do the observing and the data management that supports something, a variable like sea ice, for example. And so what we recognize, and this kind of goes back to SAON's roots as a regional player coming both from an Arctic Council and an IASC perspective, is that the tendency is really to focus on this space where science is driving the questions or the need for specific kinds of assessments are driving the requirements for our observing systems. But what we know we increasingly need to attend to and to support are things like Indigenous-led benefit identification, which comes from many different centers of authority unto itself, as do the implementation approaches that can be led by Indigenous organizations and communities. So a different center of action. But we also recognize that the global networks are a key center of action, and that their own essential variable frameworks provide an interesting and useful starting point for our own endeavors. So at the center, where our needs converge and merge and overlap in a space of shared benefit, we focus on developing requirements and implementation strategies called shared Arctic variables that can help us align these many different centers of action. And I'd like to acknowledge Alice Bradley and the first working group of the Arctic Observing Summit from last year's meeting in Iceland, who helped SAON move towards this improved language over its own essential Arctic variables concept. And so that's just a sampler of what's in the ROADS process. It's not an overview. We don't have a ton of time. But what I do want to say is right now, as we're launching into this process to begin to identify these variables, we have an open call for our advisory panel to provide cross-cutting guidance on the shared Arctic variables, but also to assure that we're following our own guiding principles that we've laid out in the process that can be read in a manuscript that is in press at Arctic right now. Our nominations are going to be accepted through October 1st, though I think we might be extending this slightly just to make sure we get everybody at the table that we need to get at the table. And I would just like to underscore that participation from this community in our advising process and our expert panels would be very welcome. So I will stop there and thank you very much for your time.